Lori, please begin recording. Thank you so much. I'd like to call the MWPA Executive Committee meeting of February 3rd, 2022 to order. Roll call, please.
Member Goins.
Here.
Member Rondoni.
Here.
Member McEntee.
Here.
Member McMillan.
Here.
Member Kurtz.
Here.
All present. Thank you.
Thanks all. Agenda adjustments. Any requests to adjust the order of the agenda? Seeing none, this is open time for public expression. The public's welcome to address the executive committee at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised, pursuant to government code, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take any action on a matter not on the agenda. Comments be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful of the community. And please all silence your cell phones and all mute your microphone when not reporting out. Lori, do we have any public?
This time, would anybody like to address the members for items not on the agenda? Now is the time to raise your hand. Seeing none. Thank you.
Okay, thanks all. Let's move on to Mark, the Executive Officer's report. Welcome, Mark.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And let me get my screen share going for us. Laura, can you give me a thumbs up if everything's looking appropriate, or anybody? Thank you. At the risk of sounding like a broken weather, not broken weather, broken record, I'm continue to be concerned with the weather. We had been seeing that nice interval of rain and dry period and rain and dry period. Even when we had 2 weeks of dryness and warm temperatures in January, I was still not necessarily getting too worried because we almost always have a really warm 2-week period in January or February. But now that we've gone close to a month without precipitation, I am starting to get worried. I just took a quick look at our fuel moistures, and the 10-hour fuel moistures are back down to historic lows, and the 100-hour fuel moistures are getting close to historic lows. And then this is my broken record part. The even heavier fuels haven't really adjusted based on the rain. So we need to start getting back into our rain cycle. The last 4-month prediction I saw, which included January, still calls for normal to slightly above normal precipitation. So hopefully that prediction pans out and we really do get back into the rain cycle. And here's what is interesting. The second bullet point, Colorado fire. Last month, it was Colorado fires. This time it's the Colorado fire because it was a fire in Palo, Colorado in Monterey County. 700 acres. It came because of someone burning a burn pile in high wind conditions. And I'm sure you all noticed the press release put out by Chief Weber with this last wind event that we had, reminding everyone not to have, and then actually banning any burns and recommending to people with backyard fire pits and such not to be burning. The Colorado fire is in a part of Monterey that burns frequently. However, the 700 acres of the Colorado fire was actually in a spot where there's no recorded fire history. It's a small pocket in that area that didn't have any recorded fire history. That canyon is one of the nastiest canyons I've ever fought fire in. And I've heard it described as a major fire. Let's be honest, 700 acres is not a major fire. And I would hazard a guess the biggest reason I got to 700 acres is because of the difficulty to make access to that. I'm sure you've all driven over the Bixby Creek Bridge. Look to your east, and that's where that fire was. I talked to a friend of mine that is a battalion chief for that battalion and was actively involved with that. And their rain pattern had been very similar to ours. Our fuel moistures were trending just a little bit higher than theirs. So there's definitely a similar threat here in Marin. However, we do have the appropriate staffing for our engines for this time of year. We're calling it winter preparedness. We would just have a delay in any aircraft that we would normally anticipate for a vegetation fire. But definitely the trend, both weather-wise and having a 700-acre fire in January is something to keep an eye on. But I think it's too soon to say that we are entering into an earlier, quote, fire season, even though we're not really using that term anymore. Just wanted to give you an update on the operations and advisory technical committees. They have been pushing hard, full forward, full speed ahead. And Anne has got them very well organized. We have a very clear schedule for them to follow. We have the public portal, and this image right here over to the bottom right is just a quick snapshot of what the public, or not the public portal, well, it will be public, but what the work program or work plan portal is going to look like for our member agencies. This is just an opening page, and then they can start working on any new project proposals, which is far more streamlined and will be much easier for our member agencies to submit projects. And then it is going to be even easier for us to turn that around and make that viewable to the public. It's just almost as a matter of switching a couple switches, programming wise, to be able to make this visible to the public. And the flow is that we do have our, as we discussed at the last board meeting, the strategy for this next work plan created by the ops committee, continuing with the house out and continuing with evacuation route clearings, increasing the number of shaded fuel breaks that we start working on along the wildland urban interface boundary, finding a way to expand our audience with our public education, and to work with insurance companies or IBHS or legislators in order to create a partnership that we can get insurance companies not to cancel or non-renew our insurance policies here in Marin. So the advisory technical committee has that. The portal is now open. We have, I just looked at it yesterday. We have projects popping up in there. So our members are in there and entering their projects now. And like I said, has a really detailed schedule for them. We have meetings that are getting scheduled far in advance. So we have that track moving forward. It's great. The management analyst position and the grant specialist. I actually have a meeting later today with RGS to begin the recruitment for the management analyst. Very much looking forward to getting that going. And we have legal looking at what a contract might look like for both the management analyst and the grant specialist. And once that contract gets close to being near draft, I could start recruiting for a contractor for a grant specialist. It'll be different than the recruitment for a management analyst, since the grant specialist will be a contract position. And this is a welcome change in the red flag warnings that we will see in the future. Our zone for Marin had always been connected to the North Bay Hills and including the Napa Hills. And if the Napa Hills got into red flag conditions, it automatically put Marin in red flag alert warning conditions. Simply, they were considered the same zone. But quite often, we really didn't hit the weather parameters to require a red flag in Marin. So the duty chief of Marin County Fire Department would call up National Weather Service and go, hey, are we really in red flag conditions here in Marin? Do we need to put out the alert for red flag? They would do a detailed analysis of that specific of our areas in Marin. And then sometimes they would call back and say, you know what? No, you guys really aren't in red flag warnings. We're going to pull that subsection out. Well, based on doing that so many times, they decided just to redraw the zones. And so now that you see, like, for instance, zone 502 is no longer part of zone 504, which we always used to be. So the good news is that we always worry about warning fatigue, red flag warning fatigue, especially if we don't have red flag conditions. So this is a welcome change, because when we put out the red flag warnings in Marin, it really will be because Marin is in red flag warnings, not the Napa Hills. And with that, I'll stop screen share and take any questions.
Great. Any questions for Mark, please? Sashi?
Mark, is there anything of note on that geysers fire?
The one that happened.
It was in the same time as the Colorado fire.
I'm sorry. I thank you for asking. I didn't mean to bring that up. There were, I think it was a couple small fires that were a couple acres or less in the geysers. And it does highlight the fact that it's year round. Wildfire threat is year round in California. And that's why we're trying to get away from the term fire season and saying that we're in winter preparedness, we're in summer preparedness, we are in red flag preparedness, because we need to be prepared year round. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anything of note about the ignition source, like, the pile burning thing was important to note that for Colorado.
I haven't heard what it was in the geysers.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ashi. Other questions? Julie, please.
Hi, Mark, I'm just wondering if we need to do some kind of Marin Voice piece or something, just so people are aware that there's fires going on, even though it's January and February, and that the fuel load is getting drier and drier. And I don't see any rain. In fact, I think the trees are looking deader on Mount Tam than they were before. And it may just be my mind freaking out, but maybe we need to do a Marin Voice piece just to make people aware and get them in gear now instead of July or August.
I agree. And I did appreciate the article that Natalie wrote recently in the IJ. I thought that was timely. It had a lot of really good information. I appreciated Natalie doing that. A Marin Voice piece could be really important. We're also, based on a suggestion from our last meeting, looking at doing a Chipper Day Marin Voice and targeting March or April as we're spinning up for Chipper Day. So we can work with trying to get both in.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Mark. Others? Let's go out to the public for comment. Laura, please.
This time, is there anyone wanting to speak on the executive officer's report? Please raise your hand. I see none at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks all. Back to the committee for any discussion. No, thanks very much. Okay, let's move on to item number 6, which is the consent calendar. The opportunity for the public to comment on the consent calendar items will occur prior to the committee's discussion of the consent calendar. The committee may approve the entire consent calendar with one action, and the alternative items on the calendar may be removed by committee or staff for separate discussion and a vote. Take public comment.
Any public comments? None at this time.
No comments? Do any committee members wish to pull an item from the consent calendar?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you, Julie. I have a motion.
Second.
I've got Rachel first, Dennis next. Thanks very much. Lori, a vote, please.
Yes. Member McMillan,
Aye.
member Kurtz,
Aye.
member McEntee.
Aye.
Member Randoni
Aye.
and member Goins.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, let's move on to committee reports. Starting out with item A, the Citizens Oversight Committee. Let's see. Oh, Pat's joining us. Welcome, Pat. So Pat, it looks like you're going to present this item. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for having us on your calendar. Just wanted to report that the Citizens Oversight Committee is hard at work on our annual report. We were delayed somewhat by the lack of the audit being done, but moving right ahead. Obviously, in this first year of doing this, we've been developing a process, but we have 3 committees working, one working on the financial aspects, another committee on the work plan itself, and a 3rd committee on transparency, and all have completed the initial work, and a committee is putting together the entire reports now, and hope to have it out eventually, just depending on other things that might transpire. That's really all we have to report right now, but happy to take any questions that you have.
Thanks. Thank you, Pat. Thanks for the report on all the activities there. Looks like you've been busy. We're looking forward to your products. Any questions from the committee for Pat? Hi, Julie. Yes.
Hi, Pat. I'm just wondering when you think the report will be available for us.
You know, I really am not sure. I think we had hoped to have something long before now, but just doing this the first time, there've been issues that have come up that we didn't anticipate. So as soon as we can get it done, and Mark probably has a better answer to all of that than I do.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Julie. Mark?
Yeah, what I was going to add is that not only is this the first time that COC is working on a report, but it's also the first time that the auditor is working on an MWPA audit. So there has been more back and forth dialogue between our finance team and the auditor than there will be in subsequent years. And the last update that we had from the auditor is that we're looking at mid to late February for the audit. And it doesn't make a lot of sense for the COC to push out a product without having seen the audit first and include details from the audit into their report.
Thanks, Mark. That makes sense. Rachel, please.
Pat, thank you for being here. Are you, as the COC, using a template from an existing agency as sort of a guideline on the type of report? Because I've seen so many different types of audit reports, and I was wondering if you have one that you're looking at as a template.
Well, we have looked at some from other agencies, and we are really looking at the annual report that MWPA put out, and obviously our final product will be in the same template that the MWPA report was in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great question, Rachel. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, let's go out to the public for any comment on this item. Lori, please.
Is there anyone wishing to speak on the committee reports at this time? Please raise your hand. I see no hands raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks all. Back to the committee for any further discussion. There's no motion required. No. Okay, thank you, Pat. We look forward to you. We know you're hard at work. We look forward to something later this month or early in March. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Let's move on to item 8, which is discussion items. Item A is the update on the evacuation ingress egress risk assessment. Mark, I think Charlotte's not able to join us. Is that correct?
That's correct. So I'll be presenting by myself.
Okay, thank you.
And it'll be a verbal update. We had hoped that by this point in the process that we would be able to have the proponents come and give a presentation to both the exec committee and follow that up with a presentation to the full board in 2 weeks from now. However, we have been moving forward in a very purposeful manner to ensure that we are getting the exact product that we want at the timeline that we want it at and at a reasonable cost. I do want to extend a big thank you for the folks that helped us refine the RFP and then served as our evaluation panel. That's Ann Richmond from the Transportation Authority of Marin, Chief Weber, Jack Leapster from the Marin County Community Development Agency, Leslie Lacko from Marin County CDA, Chief White from San Rafael Fire, Battalion Chief Lando from Central Marin Fire, and Professor Thomas Aswell from UC Berkeley. If you think about it, there really are 3 components to the study that were culminating into the 4th component: fire modeling, risk assessment based on fire, traffic modeling, or the risk assessment based on the traffic, and then communications and the evacuation modeling, how people actually move and react and interact during an evacuation and how we notify them. The product that we're looking at would bring those all into one graphical type and also data-driven representation of our risk for evacuations. And what we're really doing is making sure that each component is dialed in just the way that it should be. We have a little bit of concern that the proposal has crept beyond what we were really looking for. And that drove some of the costs and drove some of the timeline. And we're also evaluating, do we need to make a whole new software, or are there existing software platforms where the data can be meshed in? And so those are the questions that we've pushed back to the proponent, and we're waiting for a response back from them. They have been very open to our constructive criticism, for lack of a better word, of the proposal. Long story short, we're not sure that we're going to be able to bring this to the full board in February for approval. However, we think it's better that we refine this to the product that we really need than to rush the approval process, especially since we only have one proposal. And you know sometimes the criticism that you get if you just automatically accept the one and only proposal that you receive. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Let's see, Sashi and then Rachel, please.
Thank you. I do want to say thank you for even putting this together. This is a really unique product. I think once we get it done, it'll be a model for other counties. So what are you, can you describe for us too what you think the actionable output of this study would be? Because I remember when Todd Lando initially kind of conceived of doing a study that was similar to this, that was evacuation and sort of traffic oriented, there was some thought of it would help us identify what, for example, what the critical traffic lights that might need battery backup during a disaster would be. So can you help us understand what this would enable us to do in terms of actions?
Yeah, and I consider it in layers for policymakers, for fire chiefs, city managers. It would more be like a map where there's graphical representations of the evacuation routes that are the most dangerous, regardless of whether it's because of fire threat, because of traffic conditions, lights, signals, obstructions, parking, or whatever. And then that allows the policymakers to say, hey, we really want to focus on this area. And then the next layer is the actual practitioners, for lack of a better word, the fire personnel to be able to dig in. All right, if we make these types of changes to the vegetation around the road, this is the appreciable change that we'll see. Then we can get our traffic engineers to look at it. All right, if we make these changes to the roadway, we make parking boxes, this is the appreciable change that we'll be able to have. And then on the communications and flow of personnel piece, it could be identifying that, wait a minute, maybe in a severe red flag warning, we need to pre-stage some personnel here to help with the flow of evacuation, so on and so forth. So I really see two layers, the policy and strategy level, and then that practitioner level. And then in the end, after we do the work, that we get an update of the representation of the risk. So it's not just a snapshot in time.
That is extremely helpful. What you just described there, like I would want to have that, exactly what you said there, in the staff report for the full board to understand that that's what you're trying to get out of it. Because I think people may kind of be putting their own thoughts on what this is going to be. And this is very specific. This is not just, we're going to draw out some lines and these are where the evacuation routes and community refuge areas are. There's a lot more detail in that. And it's not just like you said, a GIS layer that would be static. This is something where you'd be able to kind of see, given this risk index, what would you do? I would really like to see you codify that to help us with the board. Thank you.
Just made that note.
Thanks, Sashi. Mark, that's actionable on Mark's part. Thank you, Sashi, for your question. Rachel, please.
Great. Thank you for the update. When you talk about the layers, I just want to follow on with that. Is that like the phased work of it, or are you looking at the whole project as potentially breaking these into phases that could either be implemented? And that was the first question. And then the second one is around, my understanding is the police actually manage evacuations.
Right.
And I was wondering on that advisory committee is who's representing police?
So the first question, the layers are separate from the phasing. We are looking at phasing in the proposal. The first phase would be more of a static risk assessment. where we can take action quickly. And so we can start next fiscal year on projects, or not 23, 24, we actually could have projects based on this risk assessment. And then the next phase after that would be the interactive portal that I'm talking about.
Okay.
Then law enforcement, they weren't on here, but we have been coordinating closely with law enforcement. Rick Navarro is one of the ones that we've been leaning on the most. And I always butcher his last name, so I'm just going to say Pierre from Marin County Sheriff. We've been coordinating closely with him.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Richard. Great questions. And Mark, Julie, please.
So Mark, I'm wondering if this study is going to identify potential community refuge areas as well as the evacuation routes. And also I'm wondering, I believe when we first got this, it was over $2 million. And I'm wondering if based on your back and forth with the consultant, what that's doing to a more realistic cost.
Number one, yes, we will be able to use the results of the data to identify TRAs, or temporary refuge areas. It won't necessarily say this is the spot, but our practitioners will be able to use that information for that. And then we'll use Zonehaven as the platform to help express that to our public. Also updating our fire clear, community friendly evacuation maps that we've created. And we have not received an updated budget. However, seeing the breakdown of the budget that we saw before and where we think we can carve out time and money, I think it's going to drop appreciably. And I do want to, I forgot to add this. We've already submitted for a state coastal conservancy grant to help fund this project.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Julie and Mark. Dennis, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for the update and report. Just thinking out a little bit about when you bring this to the executive committee and the board, I think it's just something that's important enough. You don't want to rush it. And I do think that coming to the executive committee and the board, both for the presentation, just allows the public to see it a couple times if they're interested. So that's my recommendation. I don't think you intended anything else, but I think not rushing it is my message.
I was definitely leaning towards what you're saying, but thank you. That really reinforces it.
Wonderful, thanks. Any other questions from the committee? Mark, this may be a little bit too detailed. I don't know that we have the answer to this, but the evacuation areas that are identified as very risky because of the vegetation and a need for evacuation route clearance of some kind. How prescriptive do you expect this to be as far as the type of treatment, you know, the width, the nature of the treatment, the stand density that you may want to work towards, or if it's not that detailed, do you expect that there's going to be subsequent analysis required in those areas to really dial in exactly what kind of work we need to do and then do the environmental work?
I may be completely unreasonable with what I hope, but I hope that our practitioners will actually be able to literally move a dial that says, if we do 15 feet of clearance, this is what it's going to look like. If we do 25 feet of clearance with this type of work, I hope they're going to be able to have that type of sliding scale. Don't know yet, but that in my mind, that's kind of what we're looking towards.
Okay, well, that's great. I'm really intrigued by this product. I think it's going to be a wonderful, informative end product for us. Sashi, please.
Just a clarifying question on top of what you asked, Bruce. So just to, so this is going to be essentially a decision support tool, right? So it's going to give you, tell me if this is right, like that you're going to get some information that you can then use to have, like, as you said, the practitioners, you know, the fire professionals and the, you know, the traffic engineers to be able to kind of go, okay, well, so now that we know that, we can focus on this, we can ground truth the area ourselves, we can figure out what we want to do. And then they could start to scope projects, which would either be MWPA projects or member agency projects as appropriate. Is that kind of what you're thinking? And then, and the tool to be able to kind of go, all right, so, you know, we move it here, that would just, again, be a decision support. It wouldn't actually spit out, and here's what you must do. It'll just be supporting the practitioners and being able to focus their work. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sashi. Thanks. This is exciting. Any other questions, directors? Let's move to public, please. Lori?
At this time, would anybody in the public like to speak on item 8A, update of evacuation? Please raise your hand. I see no hands raised. Thank you.
Okay, thanks all. Back to the committee for any discussion, feedback? No. Julie, please.
I just wanted to echo what Dennis said in terms of bringing this back to the executive committee one last time before it goes to the full board. I think our discussion always adds a lot of value. I think, if it gets to be a really detailed discussion, then people on the board can watch the recording. So I think it's more efficient to do it that way. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. And I see Mark nodding his head. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item 8B, update on the vegetation management specialist, wildfire mitigation specialist lead, and the wildfire mitigation specialist position descriptions. Mark, please.
And so it goes right along with that package of what the ad hoc strategic subcommittee had made recommendations for. We've already moved forward, as I mentioned, on the management analyst and the grant specialist. The next half of the equation was our vegetation management specialist positions and WIMS lead and the WIMS. We have been working really close with the operations committee and the ad hoc subcommittee of the operations committee, and also meeting with our folks that are actually working in our member agencies and getting these projects done that we're currently getting done. What has been their workflow? What has been their flow of communications? How have they been getting contractors, so on and so forth. At this point, we have just a full agreement that we should bring on the chipper days as a vegetation management specialist into the MWPA and fund that position from the chipper days project. The good thing about that is no net increase for costs for the MWPA because we already had that budgeted. It was that person was just being employed by Fire Safe Marin. So it's a cost neutral action. There was a lot of concern amongst the operations committee that adding just one more VMS on top of the chipper days person would not create the results and the increase in productivity that we're looking for. But we're still finding that balance of are we more effective if that VMS works for the MWPA, or are we better off to have that VMS work for the member agencies? And I think the answer is going to lie in both. I think there's going to be some agencies where the efficiencies are going to be better if the VMS is at the agency, and I think there's going to be some agencies it'll be better if they are housed at the MWPA. So regardless, we'll be able to bring a VMS position description with a salary range to the board at the next board meeting so that we can bring the chipper days person over and keep that going. And that while we continue to work with the operations committee to find that balance of where the VMS is. The other balance is, where is that VMS funded from? Do we fund it? I see three options. Option one is that if it's a MWPA position, we carve it out of the core at the top. Or if it's going to be a VMS that supports a particular geographical region, we can make that a core project for that specific area. And vice versa, if the member agency for that area, they could make that a core project for their in-house VMS. And then the third option is to carve out project costs within each of the projects that funds the VMS position, which is very similar to how public works agencies work now for their projects. They're carving out costs. So those are the three options. We're working through those three options. And when we come to the full board with the final package, I think we'll probably include a more detailed version of those three options. The WIMS and the WIMS lead, currently we don't have a demand from our member agencies asking us to do that. But since it is literally written into JPA language that we are supposed to be able to do that, we're continuing forward with the position description for approval so that we have that in our inventory. We just may hold off on a salary survey at this time. It might be an effort that's not worth expending until we actually have member agencies coming to us and saying, hey, we want you to start doing the defensible space evaluations for us. Then we can open that up. But I'd rather get the work of the position descriptions completed, have them in our inventory, That way we're ready to react if we get that request from a member agency. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Questions, please, from the committee? No. Mark, I have one question. As you look at these options, and I know that how it's going to be funded, I'm assuming that you're going to bring your model, your funding model through the finance committee for vetting.
Absolutely.
Okay, just wanted to confirm. That's my only question. Let's see, let's move out to the public for comment on this item, please.
Are there any citizens that would like to speak on item 8B, position descriptions? Please raise your hand. I see no hands raised.
Okay, thanks. Back to the committee for any discussion, feedback. Again, there's no motion required. Okay, seeing none. Thanks. Oh, hold on, Tashi.
Just wanted to reinforce again that this is a really great example of the flexibility that you're building in, Mark, of being able to have MWPA create some efficiencies, but also taking advantage of the strengths of various agencies and tuning it to what works in each zone. And I just want to encourage continuing to do that as we build this out. We're a countywide agency, but we're taking advantage of not being one size fits all and really being able to tune to what each zone needs. So again, great work on that. Let's keep that up.
Thank you. And if I may add one last thing, and I think that the linchpin is going to be our management analyst, and being able to have the management analyst establish and maintain a list of vendors and contractors, and then have our member agencies be able to leverage through our management analysts access to those contractors and vendors and allow the MWPA to do the procurement process rather than the member agencies each having to individually go through their own separate procurement processes.
Thanks very much. Okay, let's see, did we do public comment on this yet?
We did.
We did, yes. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to item C, which is the MWPA style guide and communication strategy deliverables update. Mark, again.
Yeah, we figured we hadn't discussed our communication strategy in quite some time, probably since we actually got it approved. So sometimes if we aren't given updates, you can get a sense that we aren't getting any traction with our communication strategy. So we just wanted to show you that we really have. So some of the things that we have completed through that strategy were the spring community workshops, which I thought were really beneficial. And that was the community being able to hear from their local fire professionals what's going on and be able to ask questions. The Zone Haven launch, we managed we managed a lot of part about the Zone Haven implementation, but we also managed the public media campaign for that. Part of the communication strategy had an organization and flow of communication charts, and I've actually been able to use that a couple times when people ask, hey, how are you guys communicating with each other, so on and so forth. The website development, I think, is one of the key things. We were chatting before the meeting. The layout of that website has actually made it easier for me to access information that I go to the website to get information rather than my personal filing system. It's better organized. The annual report, I really pleased with the way it came out. And then the last piece that we just issued was the style guide and then our key messages. And the intent on that is that everything coming out of the MWPA has a look and feel, and when people see it, they know it's coming from the MWPA. And it's also, we have a set of quotes or statements so that every member agency has access to it. So each of our 17 member agencies are saying the same thing in the same way, and we can have that consistent messaging. My hat's off to Pamela Kuhn with Pam Kuhn Creative. I couldn't be happier with the product that she's created. We did cancel the summertime, the fall community session meetings. Quite frankly, everyone was just too busy, and we weren't going to put that additional burden on the fire professionals to be able to talk to their communities. In progress, we still have our project and communications information strategy. Part of that will be embedded into our website so that the public can see very easily and monitor the progress of our products. And that's included with the metrics for success, refining our social media strategy, our outreach strategy, and then identify if and when risk communication templates might be used. In other words, when we already have our inventory of statements, comments for when something bad happens. Let's say there's a large fire that's going through a community, we can already have statements that we've worked out ahead of time instead of trying to craft them at the time of emergency. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Committee members? Any questions? Julie?
Thank you, Mark. I think this is great. I especially like all the quotes and the elevator speech, and I'm just wondering how this is being shared with the 17-member agencies. I think it would be great, like being on a town council, if my town manager gave me a packet of the annual report and this style guide with all the, quotes in the elevator, not the whole thing, but just, certain key things, so that I and my other council members would have that handy in our back pocket should questions come up. So I'm just wondering how you're planning on sharing this.
And I'll be honest, I want to share it better than we shared the messaging for the Zone Haven rollout. And I'm still learning the best way to communicate with each of our member agencies and find a way that who the right person is to get this information to each of our 17 member agencies. It's slightly different. For some, it works great if I reach out to one of our board members. For some, I need to go to the town manager. For some agencies, I need to go straight to the PIO. So we're finding that right balance and tailoring it to each of our member agencies. So I don't have the short answer to you right now, but we are working to improve what we did with the Zone Haven launch.
Thank you. Rachel, please.
I had the same type of question, is if we could have a city council template that has the same information essentially, and then you'd have each city's information. So the cities don't have to create their own. I think that was where Julie was getting to as well. So you have something that's easy for the cities to be able to use. And the second question I had, or comment I had, was around additional tagline. I really liked what you had said earlier in the meeting about we don't have fire season, it's all year, and some tagline around that's really, it's a consistent, and what did you call it? It's
Preparedness levels.
Something around that.
Okay.
Some tagline, because I think that really is the messaging around this, the JPA, is that we're not just about a season. And so I think that tagline would be a helpful addition.
Thanks, Rachel. Sasha, please.
Thank you. I think Rachel's suggestion is a good one, to have the ability to customize to the member agencies, but I'm wondering if that should be done, worked through the operations committee, and maybe it could be suggested to ops that they consider creating sort of an ad hoc subcommittee on communications and on how they would prefer that to flow to them. And then we can just get their direction on what they would want and need, so that we don't do a bunch of unnecessary work that they don't want, or that that we're all being effective.
Great point. However, I want to be sensitive to their time commitments right now. Ann and I actually had a meeting
For the work
chair.
plan, yeah.
Yeah, we've got 3 separate ad hoc subcommittees with the operations committee right now. So
yeah, so maybe that gets tabled until after that chunk of work gets done. But it's probably a good discussion to have, and it would be sort of a once a year maybe discussion of like, hey, how do you guys want to deal with comms?
And it also could be Ann and I having one-on-ones with each member of the ops committee. And they probably have the best read how to get that message out within their ops.
Yeah, I'd want them to tell us what they need.
Yeah, great point.
Okay, thank you, Sashi. Thanks, Mark. Any other comments, questions? Let's move to the public, please.
Is there anyone wishing to speak on item 8C, the style guides? Please raise your hand. Seeing none. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lori and all. Back to committee for any discussion and feedback. No, really a fantastic product, really. So beautifully done. Great. Let's move on to item 9, which is the Board of Directors agenda review. This is review of the February 17th, 2022 agenda. Mark?
I think the agenda pretty much speaks for itself with one minor change, and that's based on the feedback we received today, is that for sure we will have an update for the EVAC risk assessment, but we won't have a presentation and an action item to approve, so that we can make sure that it comes to the exec committee first. And I was going to recommend that perhaps we pull the education item out of February, because I was getting the feeling that this was going to be a jam-packed agenda. If we were going to have that presentation for the risk assessment. However, I think we just cut 30 to 45 minutes out of that meeting. So perhaps we should put, I shouldn't recommend not having an educational item. And I would love to hear feedback from you what that educational item could be.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Questions, comments, recommendations? Mark?
Crickets.
Yeah.
So sorry, this is for this upcoming meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
It could be information on where the insurance companies are going, and some of the research and work that IBHS is doing in that space. It might be a little premature.
I think it's premature. I just talked to them just right before this call, so I'll talk to you about that offline. But I have more on for you on that.
Okay. And looking at you, could it be an expansion on some of the CEQA conversation that we had at last meeting?
Could be. I remember that Julie brought up the idea of discussing relative costs of different types of environmental documents and efforts. And so that could be a good topic for this meeting, especially given that we'll be talking about budget at the ops committee level. So we could do that in February. We were planning on making that a March topic, but we can move that up.
Yeah, maybe not only just the cost, but also the time that it takes, both of those things. I think, I'd like people to understand that this is not just take something off the shelf and, duplicate it and do a global replace of a site. It's much more nuanced than that. It's much more difficult.
I think we have our item.
Sounds good.
I'd be interested in hearing about federal and state programs that support our core work, and what the game plan is as far as we had Bill Kuhn last year basically state that he thought that he could double the tax revenue, and of course we're just a startup, but I'm really interested in kind of what the game plan is, what the outlook is. So eventually, if we could have a discussion of financial assistance and our funding strategy.
And I think that would be more along the lines of a staff report, because right now, we either submitted or in draft, we're at about $6 million worth of grant requests right now for this year, and I anticipate that to increase.
And that, these are items that you could put in the executive officer's report, but I do think maybe a separate item, just to let us know the scope, the breadth of programs, what's available and what we envision. And also I know that there's been strategic work with key partners on who's applying, and just to kind of keep us informed as to all the work you're doing behind the scenes, which is really great.
We can make that a staff report in a future meeting.
Okay, thanks. Julie, please.
Yeah, I just had another idea. The guy, Daniel Swain, who lives in Boulder, but is affiliated with UCLA. He had a lot of comments about the Boulder Marshall Fire. And I'm sure he has comments about the Colorado fire that was in Monterey, these Colorado fires. maybe it's probably too soon to get him on board for February, but I think a lot of people would be really interested in getting 10 minutes of his time, kind of getting from a climate change, environmental, the fuel, moisture, all that stuff. I think that would be really interesting.
And that's a great recommendation and I really appreciate his writing and presentation style, the way he delivers the message.
Yeah, he did that Nature Conservancy video that we all watched at the beginning. And I think he's just a fantastic guy and doing a lot of thinking out of the box. I think he's kind of the expert on the whole thing, especially for the Western US. So, to the extent we could get him or even have him become some kind of an advisory member to our group, I think that would be fantastic.
And by recommending now, that definitely gives us an opportunity to get them on the calendar for March or April.
Great, thanks, Julie, Mark. Okay, other questions, comments, suggestions? Let's see, we'll go to the public for comment on this, please.
At this time, does anyone like to speak on the Board of Directors agenda for February 17th? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Back for any further discussion and feedback? Okay, let's move on to information items. Item 10, any committee members or staff have information items for this committee?
I'd like to mention that I accidentally ran into Fire Foundry's first day and showed up on their doorstep, which was really nice. Very much a surprise to everyone. Mayor Kate, myself, and a few others. We were actually just in the area around taking a look at things, and we got to see their first day, meet all of the new recruits, and see the facility. And so maybe, Mark, down the road, once they get a little bit more established, if there could be a tour, I think people would be really interested in seeing and hearing about that program on the ground. It was really nice and really exciting to see what they're doing.
Great.
Thank you, Rachel. That was, I was thinking that as a future agenda item. So you beat me to the punch. It's fantastic. I heard about it yesterday at a meeting. It sounds like they're up and running, and it's just gonna be amazing. So thank you. Other information items, please. Dennis, please.
Yeah, Bruce, just to follow up on that. I think I had this discussion with Mark already. Given the workload we have, given the interest in the Fire Foundry, I think we should look at how to start another group or two. I just think that it's going to be so valuable to us to have this work going on, this training going on, and I think they had 40 qualified candidates, is what I understood, and they picked 12 with 2 alternates. So there's plenty of quality people that are interested, and I just think if there's some way we could package this up and start another one, it would be terrific, another 1 or 2. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Dennis. I was in a meeting yesterday at the request of Kate Anderson, just to make some observations about some of the veg managers, the folks that are supporting the ATC. And there was a report given on the Fire Foundry, which was just first class. But they also talked about the TAM crew, that and I have this, that there's 2 21-person crews that are a work in progress. And just looking at this collectively, I like your suggestion, Mark. However, you can act on this, but there's a lot of motion on hiring. So how the TAM crew is different, I know, than the Fire Foundry. Different candidates, different program, different. But Mark, maybe we could just get a bigger picture on some of this as far as all of that which isn't going on in the background.
You bet.
Okay. Great. Any other informational items? I have an item. I've been working representing MWPA with a coalition of the interests that are addressing all the the biomass that we're generating from our fuel hazard work, where it's going to go, how it's going to be processed. We are on tap within about another week to get, the Marin RCD, Marin County RCD has stepped forward as an applicant to the Governor's Office of Planning Research for a $500,000 grant is coming in, I'd say within the week, to figure this stuff out. Where's the biomass? Characterize it. Where's it coming from? Where's it going? What's the current? Look at the carbon footprint. Look at product opportunities. Look at siting. Electricity, gas, all kinds of things can be generated. So I just want to let you know that we're within a week of that grant coming in, and Nancy Scolari, the RCD director, their board has approved this. So I would expect at some point in time, we probably want to have a little bit more information on this, Mark, as far as the relationship to MWPA, to our chipper contracts, to optimizing the flow of that material to reduce impacts on climate change and to provide economic activity. And anyway, yeah, I just want to let you know that we're about a week away from getting $500,000. We, this group, and I say we because I've been in every one of those meetings for the last year and a half. Bell Cole is the lead. Bill Carney. We have Jeff. We have an agricultural carbon specialist, Jeff Creek. We have an entrepreneur who is developing pyrolysis to biochar technology. Anyway, a handful of other folks, and I've just done this work for a couple of decades professionally in biomass utilization. So I want you to know that we'll get in some discussions, and this we may need to engage in how we move our material, how it goes, who it goes. And I've mentioned the possibility of long-term contracts with those that move material. It's beneficial to us, beneficial to the contractor. It can also allow us to make some long-term commitments for flow of biomass to wherever it's going to go, so that there could be some entrepreneurial investment here, maybe some new small scale technology cited as a result of this. I'm excited about it, and I have nothing, I don't know where it's going to end, but it is biomass from WPA, all the veg work that we do, and all the green waste that's being generated from households in Marin. Pretty exciting stuff. We're just about to declare a victory here in funding. Sashi.
I think that's really excellent. And, that sounds like a great educational topic for the future. I would love to hear more about this. And I know definitely from my work in Sonoma County that, there's a lot of interest in that area too, particularly in the biochar kind of side of it. But yeah, I would love to see you report out on that on an educational item in the future. Great.
And we've been in discussion with Zero Waste Marin. There are two JPAs that are participating in this. Our authority, just because OPR is interested in Marin County because of the joint powers authorities that we have, and the community leadership, the community organization, the ability to solve. Multiple members have the same problem, ability for them to work together and develop solutions that are beneficial to all. So, and consistent solutions where that makes sense. So.
And Bruce, sorry, one more thing on that. The OPR is also in conversation with the North Coast Resource Partnership, which is just to the north of us. So I think some coordination of some of those conversations might actually be really helpful too. So I'll reach out to you about that.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks. Yeah, look forward to it. Julie, please.
I've talked to Bell Cole, Bruce, about all the work that you've done to try to get that grant and advance that cause. And so you're kind of being modest about your involvement. And I think it would be great to have an educational item to showcase that work and that great, terrific grant that you helped secure and where it's going in the future. So okay. Thank you. Thank you for all that work. That's wonderful.
Thanks so much. Yes, let's make that happen then. Any other information items? I think we're kind of moving into the committee members requesting future agenda items. Sounds like we've got some of that. So any requests for future agenda items? I think, Mark, you've already heard about some of the job career development briefing, the biomass project. What else?
This our Stanford report that is just about at final draft phase now, and in fact The author of the report and I will be meeting next month to help her create a presentation for next exec committee and board meeting. So March exec, March board for a presentation on that Stanford report, which is the history and the development of the MWPA.
Yeah, I can give a little background on that. At the very beginning of this formation of MWPA, several of us talked about, we're getting a lot of questions. Who are we? How do we form? How are you funded? How are you governed? And so it was actually Stephen Keese and I had a conversation, and we agreed that we should be able to find a master's student or a PhD student, somebody that's interested in public policy, governance. Anyway, Stephen went out and this is to Rebecca Suggs, Pat Randolph, a couple of others. They went out to Harvard, Stanford, and Cal, and asked the question. And we landed with Stanford, a PhD student who is phenomenal, very bright. And this is the third edition of the report that is the MWPA story. It's a combination of, it goes back to about 2002 up to today, as far as what's transpired, so that we can tell our story. And Mark and Miri, her name is Miri Powell, have consented to basically take this 55-page report and to try to put it into a PowerPoint presentation that we can use publicly to share. So there's been a lot of work in the background, and I'm just thrilled that when you all see this, you will be, well, you're all thrilled anyway. So but the product is fantastic and allow us to tell our story. So Mark, yes, that's a great suggestion. Julie.
Well, I can't wait to see that and read it. And I was thinking that the newest member of the COC, I think his name is Michael Wara,
Yeah.
is a Stanford Law School professor and very, very involved in all this kind of stuff. And there may be good synergies, given that he's at Stanford, to have him take that and run with it.
Great.
Definitely, we'll get that connection going.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, it looks like we're loading the plate up here for more free discussion. I think we're to the very end. I thank everybody for a really great meeting, Mark and Anne for all your work, and Megan, of course. Let's see, it is 11:04, February 3rd, 2022 to adjourn this meeting. And we'll see all of you at our next board meeting on February 17th. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Yikes. I've been doing a lot of work in the background.